Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome an award-winning author of 85 books. She's also an editor, a teacher, and most importantly, a fellow Brooklynite. Please help me welcome Leslea Newman. Leslea, thanks so much for joining me.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we have a lot to cover, but I want to start, of course, where in Brooklyn are you from?
Brighton Beach, Brighton 4th Street.
So how long were you living there before you moved?
So I lived there till I was 8, and then my family moved to Long Island, where I stayed till I was 16, and then I left home, but my beloved grandmother remained behind in Brooklyn, so I was there all the time.
So you stayed there. Okay. Now, can I ask this? Now, why'd you leave home?
To go to school.
You go to school? So I was reading that your name came from combining your Hebrew and English. You did that on your own?
Did when I was 16.
When you were 16, you did?
So,
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
So what happened was I was put in the boys' gym class at school. Just by the computer, and the boys teased me mercilessly for this. So I decided I needed a different name. So I thought about Leah for a while, but then I wanted a unique name because I always wanted to be a famous writer. So I combined my name Leslea and my Hebrew name Leah, as you said, to come up with Leslea. And my dad was a lawyer, so I asked him to help me change my name legally. And he said
Really?
He would do it, which, yeah.
But you did all this, and you asked him to legally change it?
I did. And I'm surprised that he went along with this, but he said he would do this, but under one condition, which was that he did not work for free, and I had to pay him. So I said, well, how much are you going to charge me? And he said, I'm going to charge you a nickel. So I gave him a nickel. And he put it in his shirt pocket, and he said, you have now retained me as your attorney for life.
Oh, that's awesome. So was just have to ask, was your family observant at all growing up or no?
We were really your basic cultural Jews. My grandparents were all immigrants that came over at the turn of the century in the early 1900s. So they were native Yiddish speakers. My parents understood but didn't speak, and I, of course, understand only phrases. But my grandmother, and I actually have her Shabbat candlesticks, but my parents were basically, we went to shul on the high holidays. We had a Seder at home. We lit the menorah, and that was about it. But we always knew that we were Jewish. And I, in fact, begged for an Easter bonnet and a Christmas tree. And I was told, no, those are not our traditions. And, at the time I was very upset. But, in hindsight, I'm very grateful.
Were you very Jewish minded yourself or not so much?
My brothers were both bar mitzvahed. I was not bat mitzvahed. Actually, I went back and had a bat mitzvah when I was 45.
Ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for a while, I was very rebellious. So I wanted to, not that I wanted to, I just rejected everything, that was close to my family, including my Judaism. But then I took it all back when I turned 27 and came out. And then I really embraced all of who I was, including being a Jew.
Well, I want to go back to something that you just said a couple of minutes ago, that you, even at that young age, you knew that you wanted to be a writer?
Yes. I started writing poetry actually probably when I was about 8 years old. When we moved from Brooklyn to Long Island, I was very bereft. It's such a different world. In Brooklyn, I could walk around the city. I was very independent.
Right.
My grandmother lived right across the street. Long Island, we were trapped in the house, basically. My mother didn't drive. So I would get on the school bus and go to school and get off the school bus when I got home. And then I was in the house. And so I started writing poetry to just kind of ease my sorrow. Just innately. No one said, why don't you write some poems that'll make you feel better? But I just started organically doing that, and it did make me feel better.
So at 8 years old, is that when you first started?
Yeah.
And where in Long Island did you move? We had similar things. I went from Brooklyn and went to Long Island later on also. And you're
okay,
right.
So we moved to Jericho,
right.
Exit 40 on the LIE.
The Long Island is like Brooklyn, yeah, you could walk around all the places. In Long Island, you need a car for sure to get everywhere. So, were you in school? Did you start going into doing writing things as well? Did you go to like publications for your schools also, or no?
Not really. I mean, when I was in 12th grade, I took a creative writing class, and I had a wonderful, wonderful teacher, Miss Stern. And actually, I was inducted into my high school Hall of Fame, which I didn't even know they had one, in 1999.
Oh,
And
fantastic!
she greeted me at the ceremony with a folder of my poems
Oh, that's
that
so
she had
nice.
kept. And I said, "Did you keep all your student poems?" And she said, "No, no, no, but I knew that you would be a writer." And she held on to them, and that meant so much to me.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what I was reading is your first published pieces were in 17 magazine, right? So do you remember what they were?
I do, of course, I have them actually. So one was a poem about my dad,
Okay.
and one was a love poem to a boyfriend, and I forget what the third one was, but I remember Cosell, daughter of Howard Cosell, was the editor,
Oh,
poetry
wow.
editor at that time. And she invited me up to the office, and I took the Long Island Railroad into Manhattan. And I remember I felt very sophisticated. I was wearing like a black leotard and a wraparound skirt that I bought in a used clothing store that used to be a curtain. It was flowered, and these little black cloth Mary Jane shoes. And I, went up to the office, and she met me, and she brought me into her desk, and she had a big shopping bag full of papers, and she dumped them out, and it was very dramatic, and she said, "This is the mail I get every single day, and your poem stood out like a shining star."
Oh, fantastic. So what's that like for you? How old were you at this when you did this?
So I was 19 at this time.
What's it like for you just to see your name in something like in such a nationally known magazine?
My God, it was thrilling. I thought this was it. It was going to be easy street from here on up. I had no idea, how difficult it is to sustain a writing career. But I also want to say that I was paid $150 per poem,
Oh my gosh.
and which was a fortune to a
Of
teenager, right?
course. Yeah.
And it's probably one of the most money I've ever gotten for a poem. It's kind of up there to this day. Usually you get 2 free copies of the literary journal, right? And now it's online, so you don't even get that. But back in the day, that was just kind of amazing to me.
And it's all gonna be a piece of cake from there, right?
Correct.
So what is that the time? When did you start really feeling that you wanted to take your like I guess your writing journey seriously?
Oh, from then on, absolutely. I took creative writing classes in college. I sent my work out, from day one. I never stopped. I had a lot of chutzpah. Like I sent to places like Plowshares, which to this day has not published me, but I keep trying. That's 50 years of trying to get into a certain literary magazine.
Their loss. Okay. So also, so I want to hear about your path. You have to know this is coming. Your path to publication from there. So you started. You got your pieces published in 17. You decided you're going to start taking it seriously. So how long after that did you start? Did it take you? Start like? Did you get an agent? Did you start going on your own to becoming published?
So after that, after college, I went to Naropa Institute, to the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics, where I studied with Allen Ginsberg. And he was a wonderful teacher and a very generous teacher. And people would write, my job was to answer his mail with him in exchange for him critiquing my poems. So very often he would get letters from editors asking him for poems. So he would say to me, "Stick in a few of yours," which was so kind of him.
Well, go back a
And so
second. How'd
that,
you get that job? How'd you wind up with him?
so at Naropa, there were like work study positions. And he, of course, had to approve who he worked with, and he chose me as his intern.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Continue with the other. Yes.
no, that's okay. So I put some of my poems in this envelope with Alan's poems and sent them off, and they arrived on the desk of this man. Gee, I'm forgetting his last name at the moment, but his name was David, and he had a very tiny press called Backdoor Press. And he said, I love your poems. Do you have any more? I'd love to do a little chapbook of yours. So that is how my first book came out. And that was in 1980. And it was called Just Looking for My Shoes.
Wow. So you did all that without an agent, without anything.
I didn't have an agent till I think my maybe fifth or sixth book.
Oh, amazing. And how'd that come about?
So after that little chapbook, I published a novel called Good Enough to Eat with Firebrand Books, which was an independent feminist press.
Mhm.
And I met the editor, Nancy Beriano, at a writers' conference, a women's writers' conference, and we connected. So that's how that came about. And then she also published my book, A Letter to Harvey Milk, a book of short stories. That title story became very well known, became a short film. It became an off-Broadway musical. All kinds of things happened to that. So, I was publishing with all these small presses, and then eventually I thought that I wanted to publish with larger presses, and it seemed like the only way to do that was through an agent. So I wrote to other writer friends of mine and asked them who their agents were and could I use their name as a referral, and networked and all of that, and eventually got an agent.
So, how's that like for you to see one of your works being produced as a Broadway musical?
Well, it was off Broadway.
Off Broadway.
It was fantastic. It was a long process. It took at least 12 years. I can't quite remember now, from the time they approached me till the time they started working on it, to the time they had, readings with, manuscript in hand, through to a full production. But what I was very grateful was that it opened in 2012, and my parents were both still alive, and they got to see it, and that meant more to me than anything.
Were you happy with the production itself? Was it?
Yes.
Yes.
The songs are beautiful. The actors were amazing. It's very heartfelt, and it sticks pretty closely to the story, I have to say.
You started off writing more for adults. So how did you start saying I want to write for kids as well? Is that something you always wanted to do? Is this something that you just happened upon?
So it never occurred to me actually to write for children. And
Right.
then one day, this is kind of a very famous story. I was in Northampton, Massachusetts, where I was living, and a woman came up to me and she said, I don't have any children's books that I can read to my daughter that shows a family like ours. Somebody needs to write one. And she kind of gave me this look like, I don't mean somebody, I mean you. And, she was a lesbian mom. Her, at that time we weren't legally married. So her partner, I'll say, or spouse, her beshert,
Right.
And she had a daughter. And they were tired of changing the gender of the parents in every single book they read to their daughter. So I took this seriously, this request. I take requests because I knew what it was like to grow up and not see my own experience reflected in a children's book from being Jewish, right? We didn't have any books that showed a little girl with curly hair eating matzo ball soup with her bubby on Shabbat. We had books about Santa Claus, books about Easter, the Easter Bunny. And so that is why, going back to what I said earlier, I would ask my parents, can I look for Easter eggs? Why can't we have a Christmas tree? Because even though I grew up in this very Jewish neighborhood in Brighton Beach, that direct experience was not as strong as my experience of seeing families in books, in movies, and on TV that didn't look like my family did and had a completely different culture. So I thought something wrong with my family because we're so different than everybody else.
Well, I was reading that, about this, that you're very passionate about writing books about Judaism, also putting lesbians in a positive light. So that's directly how the Heather Has Two Mommies came about, because of this?
Yeah. Yes. And I'll continue that story just a tiny bit, which is to say that I couldn't get this book published anywhere.
Right.
And so I had a friend.
This was 88 or 89? This is
so I wrote it in 1988.
Okay.
And then I tried, for a while to send it out traditionally. Didn't go anywhere. And then a friend of mine named Sivia Gover, another Jewish woman, wonderful Jewish woman, poet also. She had a 1-year-old daughter at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And We can't remember, but one of us said, let's just do it ourselves. We're take charge Jewish women. And I was raised by a grandmother who used to always say, just because they say no to me, you think I'm finished. And so Sibia actually had a desktop publishing business at the time called In Other Words, where, she published pamphlets and it was a business. So we just did some fundraising long before GoFundMe or Kickstarter. We actually, stuffed envelopes, licked envelopes, put stamps on envelopes, and wrote to people. I had, since my first poetry reading, I compiled a mailing list. And so I wrote to all those people, as well as, of course, all our friends, and said, if you send us $10, we will publish this book and send you a copy within a year, or else we will send you your $10 back. And we kept copious records. And lo and behold, we raised $4,000. I put in a little bit of my own money. We, learned a lot, like how to get a copyright, we found an illustrator, we found a printer, and the book came out in December of 1989.
So I remember when that book came out. So I remember when it came out there too. So did you go when people you started soliciting funds for it? Did you talk about what the subject was of the book with all the people?
Oh, sure. We had a little blurb. We wanted, if you're going to give us money, you have the right to know what you're supporting, of course.
And you people try to talk you into using a pen name for this?
Yes, they did. They said, your career is going to be ruined. Nobody's going to ever publish you again. And so how ironic, it's the book I'm the most known for, right? And 85 books, as you said, it hasn't, quite stopped me.
That's fantastic. And you talk about, I've seen the lectures, you talk about Matthew Shepard a lot also. So you've written books about him. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Sure. So for people who might not know, Matthew Shepard in 1998 was an out gay college student. He attended the University of Wyoming, and he was part of the LGBTQ group. I don't think they had the Q at that time. But anyway, they were planning a week of events for coming out week in October, and he was part of that committee. And so they had a meeting on a Tuesday night, and afterwards they went out. There were, I don't know, a couple of, maybe 6 or 7 kids, I'm not exactly sure, students. They got something to eat. Then Matt wanted to go and get a drink. Nobody wanted to go with him. He went by himself. There he was approached at the Fireside Lounge by 2 men who pretended they were gay and offered him a ride home. And when he got into their truck, they started beating him mercilessly. They stole his wallet. They tied him to a fence. They continued beating him, and they abandoned him. And he was discovered 18 hours later, accidentally, by a mountain biker. He was taken to the hospital. He died 6 days later from his wounds. He never regained consciousness. His family was by his side when he died. And the day he died, I arrived at the University of Wyoming to be the keynote speaker for their Gay Awareness Week. So that is my connection. And when I gave
you not met him prior to that?
No. Mm-hmm. I had been invited the previous May and give this talk. These things are set up months in advance. Sure. And actually his friend, Jim Osborne, who was the head of the LGBT group, called me over the weekend to tell me what had happened and asked me if I still would come. And I said, of course, though I did ask for a bodyguard. Because, at that time, we didn't have the internet and cell phones the way we do now. So nobody, on the East Coast really knew what was going on in the same way as we would have now, right? Because we get news in a nanosecond. And so when I gave my talk, students from the LGBT group were in the front row, and they left one empty seat. And I just kept looking at that seat and thinking, Matt should have been sitting there, right? I should have met him. And so I started writing this book, October Morning, and morning has a U in it, Morning, a song from Matthew Shepard, which explores the impact of this tragedy through poetic monologues. So the book started with a question. The question was, they were able to figure out the timeline of how long Matt and his 2 killers were at the fence, because they know when they left and they know when his killers came back into town, because they got into another altercation in the middle of on Main Street in Laramie, and they know how long it takes to get there. So they figured out they were there all three of them, for about 15 minutes.
Mhm.
And I thought, what happened during those 15 minutes? And Matt obviously can't tell me. His killers, I don't really trust them. And their stories actually contradict each other. So I started wishing that there were witnesses there. And then being a poet, I thought, well, the fence Matt was tied to was there. The stars were watching over him. The moon was there. The truck saw what had happened. So I started just writing in those voices and to see what I could discover. And it certainly is not the truth with a capital T, but it's definitely an emotional truth, my emotional truth. And I did copious research. I went back to Laramie several times. And then I became good friends with Dennis and Judy Shepard through all this. And the foundation asked me to write a picture book about Matt, which was really difficult to do. And I tried for a decade, literally. And then I came up with a text for Always Matt, which is my editor loved it, but he said, this isn't a picture book. This is a family book. It's a poem, a full-length poem. So he hired this wonderful illustrator, Brian Bridigan, to illustrate it. And it's for, depending on the family or the young person, 12 and up, 14 and up, I think it's officially designated for, where you can really sit down and learn more about Matt's life than his death. Because, I really wanted, and his family wants people to know who he was, not just, Matthew Shepard, victim, martyr, tragic figure. I mean, he was a person.
You're still in contact with his family now?
Oh, yes.
How did they feel about the work itself?
Well, first of all, they are the kindest, most generous, most loving people on the planet. I cannot say enough good things about them, but they fully endorse both my projects. Yeah. And, whenever I tell them how grateful I am that they gave me permission to tell their son's story, they're like, no, we should be thanking you. That's the kind of people they are.
You tackle, I was looking through all your things, and I'm a big fan, but you've tackled a lot of tough subjects. You've written about, divorce, abuse, death. So is there something that draws you to that, a feeling of wanting to help people who need it?
Well, I do believe very strongly in our Jewish context of concept, that's the word I was looking for, of tikkun olam, right? Repairing the world. And, I found out pretty quickly, and I hope this doesn't sound arrogant, that I have a voice, that people pay attention to through my writing. And that's a gift. And I feel like it's my responsibility to use that gift. So when people ask me, are your books doing well? I often say, I'm not sure, but I hope, more importantly, that they're doing good.
Do a lot of people reach out to you and tell you that your books have helped them in some way?
Oh, yes. Especially now with the internet, right? It's so easy to find an author. Back in the day, we used to get fan letters, like actual letters, right? That we can hold in our hands.
Sure, yes.
And now it's mostly emails. But still, it's always great to hear from readers and to hear, that's why we write, because we want to touch people. So it's always very gratifying to hear from somebody that, something I've written has touched them and touched their hearts, touched their lives.
Oh, that's very sweet. I was thinking about that too. How just even if it's like one person that you make a difference to, it's just such an incredible feeling as an author.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and like I said at the beginning, so you've won many awards. I was looking through some of them, like Stonewall Book Awards, National Jewish Awards, and even from the Dog Writers Association, and not to be outdone, the Cat Writers Association. So what's that feeling like when the specific group recognize you for achievements that help promote their mission or causes?
Oh, it's always such a great honor. It never grows old. I love, as you said, that I've been honored by the Cat Writers Association and the Dog Writers Association. So we're being non-partial here, right? But I think, some of the awards that have meant the most to me have been, very close to my heart, coming from, the Matthew Shepard Foundation gave me their Making a Difference Award in 2018. That meant more to me, really, than words can say. And then my own adopted hometown, Northampton, appointed me as their poet laureate back in 2008. So I served in that position for 2 years. I just recently came back from St. Paul, where the Golden Crown Literary Society gave me their Lifetime Achievement Trailblazer
Oh,
Award.
wow.
And I got to get all dressed up and make a little acceptance speech. So, I don't expect any of these things. It's not why I write, but it's always wonderful to be acknowledged in that way.
Had you been aware, because I'm obsessed after reading about that, had you been aware that there was a dog writers a literary award or a cat writers literary award?
Oh, yes. So I joined both the Dog Writers Association and the Cat Writers Association because they're great organizations. They're all about being kind to animals and
Fantastic.
raising awareness.
I love that. Now, you've written, so we said before, you've written for both adults and kids. So do you have a preference at all now or no?
No, as long as I'm writing, I'm a happy camper.
All right, let's switch gears for a second here. So you lived in a kibbutz in Israel. So, okay, what prompted you to move there to try that? This is in the 80s, right? This was in the 80s?
It was in the 70s.
70s,
So
okay.
so I graduated from the University of Vermont in May of 1977. And, my parents didn't know what to do with me because I had no job prospects. I had no spouse prospects. And, I certainly didn't want to move back home. So, they just kind of shipped me off to Israel. And I don't even remember how I got connected with Kibbutz Ga'aton, because I don't remember like being in some kind of official program or anything. I just somehow wound up there, and I volunteered in the orange groves, the avocado fields. They tried to me in the laundry. That was a disaster. And then in the children's house. And I loved working in the children's house because I was learning Hebrew along with these very young children, babies. So we were kind of on the same language level. So I learned Hebrew along with them, which was wonderful. And I had a fantastic Ulpan teacher named Ze'ev, who was very animated and taught us a lot.
So your parents are the ones that were you reluctant to go or were you all willing to at that time?
It was so long ago now. I really don't remember. It was an adventure. When you're young, you kind of don't think, and you just kind of do things like that. I mean, I spent time in Eilat. I spent time in Sharm el Sheikh. I mean, places you really can't go anymore, right? So I feel so lucky that I had that experience.
What years were you there? And how long were you there
So
for?
I was there in 1977 to 1978. So I was like 21 years old.
We just missed each other. I moved there in 79 till 81. I lived
Oh, wow.
so there. So you went on the PJ Library trip, I think the year before I did. So I thought they did a tremendous job. I don't know if you've been back to Israel in the years between, being there in the 70s and how did you find those experiences revisiting after all that time?
Well, of course, I was so much older.
Right.
And I was also, traveling in style, only as the Harold Grinspoon Foundation can provide, right? We had a private tour bus. We stayed in beautiful hotels. We visited, luminaries. It was an incredible experience. But what both experiences have in common, where as soon as I got off the plane, I felt like I was home.
Yeah.
And to be a Jew among Jews, not be in the minority, not have to worry that I was, at one point, a friend and I, who was also on the trip, we were getting something to eat and at like an outdoor falafel stand. And we're waiting patiently on this makeshift line and people are pushing in front of us. And then we were like, wait a minute, what the heck are we doing? And we just like pushed, and we're like, we're not too pushy here. This is what we do, that kind of thing.
How do you find overall? I mean, first of all, did you know, you said you knew one friend. Did you know anyone else ahead of time there on the trip with you or no?
Yeah. So I knew Rich Michelson. Wonderful poet and children's book writer. I knew Lynn Oliver, who founded SCBWI. I'm trying to think if there was anyone else I knew. I mean, now I made so many friends, I feel like I've known them forever.
Do you keep in touch with everyone still?
Well, not everybody, but Erica Pearl, Alana Arnold, Alan Silberberg, just so many wonderful people were on that trip. It was just amazing.
Yeah, I had much the same experience as you. I felt the second I got there, and I was so happy that I got to go back and see it through an adult lens. after all that time. And it's just the second I started walking there, I also felt the same thing. It's just, this is my place. This is, these are my people. It was such
Yeah.
a heartwarming experience for me, like also eye-opening, just, seeing if my memories matched up from a kid to an adult. So I do want to talk about, now you mentioned before the bat mitzvah. You had the bat mitzvah later on in life. So I want to hear all about that, your experience doing it, how it came about, and what made you decide to finally do it after all that time.
So, I continued my family's tradition basically of only going to shul on the high holidays, or if somebody I knew was having a bar or bat mitzvah or getting married or whatever. So then a very good friend of mine, her husband died, and she wanted to go to shul and say Kaddish for him, but she didn't want to go alone. So she asked if I would go with her. And I said, of course. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening to the prayers, which are very familiar and comforting to me. But I thought, I don't really know like what this is all about on a deep level. And before I reject something, I really should know more about it. So I decided to take some classes. And just as some wonderful coincidence, if you believe in coincidences, I kind of don't. My synagogue was offering a 2-year adult bar and bat mitzvah program. It turned out that everybody in the class was female, so it became a bat mitzvah class. And we started with 13 people. There was some attrition, so we wound up with 7. But I didn't know how to really learn Hebrew, so I had to learn how to read Hebrew. I had to learn how to chant Haftorah and Torah, and we had a study partner, so we would tear apart our portion, of course. And then I was very surprised that nobody wanted to deliver a Devar Torah, which I thought was the point of the whole thing. Mm. And so I was kind of the spokesperson, and of course I wrote a long poem, and that was my Devar Torah. And it was a wonderful experience. I had fantastic teachers. The group was wonderful. And we not only did the Torah service, but the 7 of us divided the entire 3-hour morning service. So we led the whole thing. And it was very, very celebratory. And the night before, I had a party, and I was lifted up on a chair and paraded around. We did the whole thing. My parents came. One of my brothers came. A lot of friends were there. It was wonderful.
Very much. All right, let's go. So I'll go back to writing now. So on the topic of writing, you're a mentor at Spalding. You've been on the faculty of several colleges and universities. So you give lectures on writing. So I want to know what kind of things you talk about in your lectures. And as a faculty member, how does it feel for you? You've been so accomplished to give back to the writing community.
So I talk about a lot of things. I talk about, Heather has 2 mommies and the whole gestation of that. And then, I take it further and talk about using it as a symbol to talk about the rights of LGBTQ families and the history of marriage equality and all of that. I lecture on Matthew Shepard. I lecture on gender representation in picture books. I, of course, do readings from my work. I do all kinds of things. Being a mentor and giving back, I had to really acknowledge that I am at a point in my life where I can confidently step into that position. When I worked with Allen Ginsberg, he was 57, and I remember thinking, oh, this old guy, And now, to be 57 again, right? I'm looking backwards. But I have to say that, when my students achieve something, get published, win an award, whatever. I mean, I'm so thrilled for them. It's such a wonderful feeling to give back to the community. People have been so generous to me, Alan and Grace Paley, and people like Ellen Bass and Alicia Ostriker, all these wonderful Jewish poets that have really embraced me and my work. It just means so much to me to be following in their footsteps, and they've blurbed my books, all kinds of things.
It's funny that just what you mentioned there. I look at pictures now of myself as a child and see my parents and remember thinking at that time, wow, they're really old, and I'm older than them now in those pictures.
Right, exactly.
It kills me. So you also do teaching for individuals as well. I saw on your site that you people can just reach out to you for individuals, not as part of like a whole group.
Yeah, so I take on private students and I mentor them, and many of them have gone on to get published. Some of them come through the and various MFA programs in creative writing. But I was Kwame Alexander's mentor when he wrote The Crossover, which won him the Newbery. And so when people heard about that, they came flocking to me. And I have to always tell people, I cannot guarantee that you're going to win a Newbery. I can't make that happen. If I can make that happen, I would have won a Newbery.
Right.
But I was thrilled for him. And, so word got around that way.
So what can we look forward to from you next?
So let's see. I have a bunch of Jewish children's books coming out actually in the next few years. So I'm excited about that. So, I have a little display behind me. A Joyful Song and a Naming Story is my most recent book. And I'm thrilled because, first of all, it's published by Levine Querido, which is a wonderful press. Arthur Levine and I have been friends for many years. He was my editor for my book, Fat Chance, in 1994. So I've known Arthur for a long time. But this book features a Jewish two-mom family. And so I feel like I can take both my identities and merge them and tell the story about a little boy named Zachary who has two moms and a brand new baby sister, and they're off to synagogue for her naming ceremony. And I have two more books that feature LGBTQ families who are Jewish. So they don't have titles yet. We keep going back and forth, but one is a two-dad family celebrating Shabbat, and one is a two-mom family celebrating Shabbat. So that's exciting. I have a book coming out called Something Sweet, a Sitting Shiva Story, coming out from Charles Bridge. I have a book called Welcome, A Wish for Refugees coming out. What else do I have coming? A lot of Jewish children's books. So I'm really, really happy about that. Oh, and my first book that takes place in Israel is coming out I'm not sure when, but it's about the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. I love going there to PG Library to see the Dead Sea Scrolls, actually.
Yeah, wasn't it wonderful?
Fantastic. So, and now, how can people follow you on social media?
So I am on X, just my name, at Leslea Newman. I'm on Instagram, though I don't really use it. Lezel, Lezel, poet. Lezel was what my grandmother called me. She would say, "Oh, you're a Lezel and a half." And then on Facebook, just, you friend me, just, find my name.
And your website?
Right. So my website is lesleanewman.com. And, every book I've written has a specific page that describes it, has an excerpt, has reviews. I have biographical information. There's links to YouTube videos of, all kinds of things. More information than you would ever need to know about me.
Well, no, your website, which was good. Your website is really cool. There's a lot of information on there too, and a lot of links, as you said. So I enjoyed going through your website. So Leslea, I just want to thank you again for coming on. It's really been a pleasure. I've been a big fan of yours, and it was so lovely to get to chat with you.
Yes, I hope we meet in person.
I would love that. Absolutely love that. Well, again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. And again, a very special thanks to Leslea Newman. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.